We're here for part 11 of a 52-part series as we journey week by week through the Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday and Stephen Hanselman. And I want to start today's readings off with March 14th. The quote from March 14th is as follows. Zeno would also say that nothing is more hostile to a firm grasp on knowledge than self-deception. Diogenes Laertius, The Lives of the Eminent Philosophers. And from our authors, self-deception, delusions of grandeur. These aren't just annoying personality traits. Ego is more than just off-putting and obnoxious. Instead, it's the sworn enemy of our ability to learn and grow. As Epictetus put it, it is impossible for a person to begin to learn what he thinks he already knows. Today, we will be unable to improve, unable to learn, unable to earn the respect of others if we think we're already perfect, a genius admired far and wide. In this sense, ego and self-deception are the enemies of the things we wish to have because we delude ourselves into believing that we already possess them. So we must meet ego with the hostility and contempt that it insidiously deploys against us, to keep it away, if only for 24 hours at a time. Yeah, I think that this is an important lesson to have, because it is impossible for a person to begin to learn what he thinks he already knows. That is one hell of a quote. It is impossible for a person to begin to learn what he thinks he already knows. No matter what the discipline is, that is something which is useful. And no matter what the lesson is, maybe it is something that you already know. For me, for example, I consider myself a writer. So I think I know how to write a short story. I'm always trying to relearn how to write a short story, because there are so many different people, there are so many different prolific authors, there are so many authors that dollop profundity onto the page, and they all do it in a different way. So what could I possibly know that none of those other people do? However, so I want to talk about the opposite side of this too. Well, not the opposite side, because I think it's easy to say and to begin to humble ourselves, to say we're going to learn from everyone and to begin to humble ourselves. And where is the distinction between humbling oneself and simply accepting humility in general? And further than that, between accepting humility as a virtue and devastatingly low self-respect. And I think the word in this entire sort of spectrum of ideas that has to be accepted is work. For someone to consider themselves beyond work is to consider themselves perfect. For someone who has a devastatingly low self-respect. So the cutesy little term with this, what does self-respect mean? When you respect, you expect. I think I've gone through this on in this series here before. But so, for example, as a Chiefs fan, when I was a kid, I had ultimate respect for John Elway. No matter what the circumstance was, he could win that game. Now, I didn't like John Elway. Hated John Elway. This is something that in modern society we have to learn to differentiate. There is so much to do in today's world about Putin. And why would someone respect Putin? Well, you respect Putin because you expect from Putin. There is no reason to disrespect Putin, to not respect Putin, maybe reason to disrespect him. But to not respect Putin is to not see Putin coming. No matter how big the lead was that the Kansas City Chiefs had over the Denver Broncos, it was possible that John Elway could bring them back from defeat. That is how you respect someone. So self-respect is to self-expect. The idea of being able, ready, and willing to work, to put in the work to learn or accomplish whatever it is that has to be learned or accomplished, is self-respect. So, delusions of grandeur and self-defeat are not opposite sides of the same coin. There is a great chasm in between, and the idea of work is what fills in that chasm. I don't need to work is to have delusions of self-grandeur. I am not able to put in the work is to have too little self-respect. In the middle there is the idea of work, is the idea of being able to work, and the idea of being able to make progress. Perfection should not even be the goal, right? Because even a word like perfection is tainted by expectation. What does it, so for example, another sports term, a perfect quarterback rating is like 168.1, 168.2, something like that, something ridiculous. But there are a host of performances that can garner a perfect quarterback rating during a game. 15 of 20 for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. Probably a perfect game. Probably gets you that 168.2. 26 of 30 for 523 yards and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Probably gets you that same rating. So both of those games are perfect. Neither one of them looks anything like the other. So this idea of perfection is only reflective of the idea of complete which we have from our current stasis. This idea of, if I write the perfect novel, okay, pretend you wrote the perfect novel. If you went in and you took out a couple words that were not necessary to communicate the ideas that you needed, this would still be the perfect novel. It would just be 20 words shorter, 20 words quicker to read, 20 words less precise to the writer as opposed to the reader. And the reader is the one that counts. The kissing page to this, March 15th. Oh, yeah, the title of March 14th, Self-Deception is Our Enemy. March 15th, The Present is All We Possess. The quote here, were you to live 3,000 years, or even a countless multiple of that, keep in mind that no one ever loses a life other than the one they are living, and no one ever loses a life other than the one they are losing. The longest and the shortest life, then, amount to the same, for the present moment lasts the same for all that is all anyone. For the present moment lasts the same for all, and is all anyone possesses. To one, I can't read. No one can lose either the past or the future. How can someone be deprived of what's not theirs? This is from Marcus Aurelius in Meditations. And from our writers here. Today, notice how often you look for more. That is, wanting the past to be more than what it is, than what it was, different, better, still here, etc. Or wanting the future to unfold exactly as you expect. with hardly a thought as to how that might affect other people. When you do this, you're neglecting the present moment. Talk about ungrateful. There's a saying attributed to Bill Keane, the cartoonist, worth remembering. Yesterday's the past, tomorrow's the future, but today is the gift. That's why it's called the present. The present is in our possession, but it has an expiration date, a quickly approaching one. If you enjoy all of it, it will be enough. It can last a whole lifetime. So, something I often try to remind myself is the power of every day. And I'm not going to go off on some Kamala Harris type rant here. What I mean is sort of twofold. The power of every day is the power of being present every day that you're awake, every day that you're alive, every day that you have, being present in the now to make the now count. But it's also the power of every day as far as if you do something every day, the power of that practice grows. But this requires being present and putting in the practice. If you practice stoicism every day, if you practice presentness every day, your strength, your power in that practice is ever growing. So this idea that the present is all we possess, I can't think of anything more true than that. Meaning that the present being all we possess, you can change anything about yourself at any given time. Everything about your life, basically, is a choice. Everything that you consider about yourself, everything that you think you can and cannot do, these are all choices. Every way that we limit ourselves, every way that we empower ourselves, these are all choices. If we decide to reconsider these choices every day that we have, the power of these choices, the power inherent to the moment, only stands to become greater. March 17th, the beauty of choice. If you are not your body and hairstyle, but your capacity for choosing well, if your choices are beautiful, so too will you be. This comes to us from Epictetus in Discourses. It's that line in the movie Fight Club. You are not your job. You're not how much you have in the bank. You're not the car you drive. You're not the contents of your wallet. Obviously, our friend Epictetus never saw that movie or read the book, but apparently the consumerism of the 1990s existed in ancient Rome too. It's easy to confuse the image we present to the world for who we actually are, especially when media messaging deliberately blurs that distinction. You might look beautiful today, but if that was the result of vain obsession in the mirror this morning, the Stoics would ask, are you actually beautiful? A body built from hard work is admirable. A body built to impress gym rats is not. That's what the Stoics urge us to consider. Not how things appear, but what effort, activity, and choices they are a result of. Does anyone remember those books from mainly the late 90s, if we're channeling the 90s here, mainly the late 90s, that was like the Tao of Winnie the Pooh, things like that? Someone needs to write the Stoicism of Fight Club. There are quite a few moments in Fight Club which are reflective of Stoicism. But what is to be made of the beauty of choice? This compounds the importance of the present being all that we have. All things being considered, the freedom of choice is ultimately what creates the freedom of mind. The freedom of mind is how an individual is able to create the self. And this goes back to the type of self-respect that it takes in order to accept the self as an individual and build the self moment by moment, present by present, into whatever the self is to be. Whatever that amount of self-actualization that each of us are going to achieve in our life happens on a moment-to-moment basis. From accepting the present as all that we have and making choices to empower the self therefrom. It's part of the reason that I'm doing this series is because for a while there, I think I got comfortable in life. I think I got to a point where I was sort of accepting where I was, the things that were available to me. And that was never me before. I had always been a person with a chip on his shoulder. I had always been someone who was willing to work the extra amount. But I had gotten to a point where the work that I had put in had put me on a path where things at the logical outcome of that path would be acceptable. This was something I had not known before. I had always been someone who was, if I'm allowed to use a cliche, behind the eight ball. And I worked my way out of that starting around the middle school years, just by putting in a whole lot of work, putting in a whole lot of elbow grease. But somewhere along the way, in the last few years, I had become a bit complacent. I was still putting in the work, still going through the motions, but I'd lost the fire, the chip on the shoulder, the get up and get at it, I think, So I wanted to reroot myself in something like Stoicism. And I bought Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. But I think I needed this middleman of the Daily Stoic to really be able to sink my fingers into it. And maybe that's what I'll read after the Daily Stoic, as far as nonfiction is concerned. But it was something that I needed to do. One of the great things about Stoicism, I think Les Miles, I think that's his name, always said, if you do what is easy, your life will be hard. But if you do what is hard, your life will be easy. That's a bit of a Stoic philosophy there. And that's something that I needed to return to. And The idea of the power of every day, of waking up and grinding, is something that I needed to get back to. The idea of rising above the circumstance in my life is something that I needed to get back to, especially with the pandemic. A lot of my life reverted to you wake up and you go to work. You were working 6 days, you were working 7 days, you were working 10 hours, you were working 12. And with that came some financial stability, but at the end of your 6th consecutive, 7th consecutive, 10th consecutive shift at work, when you work 20 days in a row, it's hard to do your writing afterwards. It's hard to do your reading afterwards. It's hard to make a video afterwards. And this has really sort of helped me get back on that grind. That's why this series has been important to me. And I hope to see you. That's all I have for this video. And I hope to have you back for the next installment next week of The Daily Stoic.